Welcome back. 15 before the hour now. Donald Trump continues to push back hard against allegations he made a crude attack on Fox News debate moderator Megyn Kelly. The GOP frontrunner maintaining in phone calls over the weekend that only a deviant would interpret his remark, as many have, saying he cherishes women. Republican leaders, meantime, are worried about what Trump is doing to the party's outreach to women. Washington Post reporter Jose Delreal joins us now from the paper's newsroom downtown. Jose, thanks very much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Donald Trump was on television all weekend, by phone, not so much in person, but he was calling in, rejecting completely the notion that his interview with CNN on Friday that had this reference to Megyn Kelly that everyone's heard, that this was somehow really crude and wrong. He's saying, I meant nothing wrong. Is he in the process of putting out yet another controversy that would doom a more traditional candidate?
You know, you're right. He did go on a bit of a media blitz right after he made the comments, distancing himself from the way that most people interpreted them. You know, it's worth saying that he's probably live tweeting right now his entire day and continuing to attack Megyn Kelly's performance during Thursday's debate, even while saying that the way those particular comments were interpreted was incorrect. It's notable, though, that his GOP rivals did jump in and quickly denounced his comments. I, can tell you that GOP leaders are very nervous about what he is doing to the party's image, particularly given their performance with female voters during the 2012 presidential election.
It was already going to be fascinating to see the first good set of national credible polls coming out of the debate as a way of gauging whether Trump has, prior, this remark to the side, or even independent of this comment which came on Friday night, just as a snapshot, if you will, of what impact this hugely watched debate. I mean, 24 million for a primary debate 15 months out. That's an extraordinary number. Clearly, interest is up. So already we were going to be devouring the next set of polls to see, okay, does Trump have staying power? Is Kasich getting a bounce? Did Jebb's flat performance, is it going to hurt him? Is Marco Rubio? Is Carly Fiorina? Who's going to rise? Who's going to fall? Add this to the mix, and you've really got a fascinating moment in terms of how all this is affecting the American public generally and the Republican electorate in particular.
Oh, certainly. The thing about Donald Trump is he seems to be completely immune to the laws of political gravity. He has had controversy after controversy already just in the short few months since he announced that he's running for president. And I think particularly when we heard him make those disparaging comments about Senator John McCain and his war record, we all expected that that would be the end of a very short-lived campaign. Guess what? He got a bump in the polls after that. So, it'll be interesting to see over the coming week how those polls move. I think it might be too early to tell exactly which direction that's going to go in, but at this point, I would give up making predictions about how Donald Trump is going to move.
For folks who are trying to burnish the GOP brand, for people who are concerned not so much at this moment who the nominee is, but how that person fares in the summer and fall of 2016 against whoever the Democratic nominee is. What does this moment represent as Donald Trump says things that were, I think, broadly regarded as crude and wrong and offensive to women?
Obviously party leaders are going to be extremely nervous about these comments, but the reality of the situation and the reality on the ground is that Donald Trump is tapping into something that is speaking to the GOP base. He has a double-digit lead in the polls. That's not an accident. He is saying something that is resonating. He's taking a very strong anti-Washington message, and he's getting it out there. He's breaking through to a lot of voters. I was just in Iowa this last weekend, actually, and in New Hampshire last week, and I was there covering other candidates, and every time I asked a question about the candidate I was actually there covering, Donald Trump came up. They would bring him up to me individually and independently to tell me that they really appreciated his take on the need to reform Washington. So, we're seeing an election in which candidates who have no traditional political experience are doing extremely well among GOP voters. You have former tech executive Carly Fiorina, almost universally considered to have won the first GOP debate, just in terms of presenting herself to voters. You have someone like Dr. Ben Carson, who the national media hasn't been paying much attention to, but who is consistently polling at number 4 in national polls. He is right behind Scott Walker and Jeb Bush. So I think what we're seeing coalesce in the GOP field is a message that Washington is broken. We're seeing that message resonate, and voters are increasingly willing to turn to political novices as their leaders. People don't trust people with political experience.
But it is a moment of decision for every GOP campaign, for every GOP candidate not named Donald Trump. Do you acknowledge that he is saying things that are resonating with the electorate to try to associate yourself with whatever it is that is making him at least the flavor of the moment and potentially someone with even more staying power than we would have thought, say, a month ago? Or do you challenge and denounce some of the things he's saying because, frankly, they have the potential to turn off segments of the electorate that you'll need to be victorious in November of 2016. So, as I say, for every candidate not named Trump, this is a moment to figure out what are we about and how are we going to position ourselves.
Certainly, and I'll leave those decisions obviously up to the campaigns, but they're put in a tough position. If Donald Trump says something extremely offensive, do they respond? Do they engage? Do they leave themselves vulnerable to attacks by Trump within the GOP primary, or do they hold back and leave themselves vulnerable to attacks later on during potentially the general election, regardless of who the Democratic nominee ends up being?
Shaping up to be yet another interesting week in the race for the White House 2016. Jose Delreal of the Washington Post, thanks so much for joining us. Great having you with us.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
We're back with a program note right after this.